I am Hope Reger. I live in Ohio, where all four seasons happen in a week, and we're feeling that this week as we speak. I live with my husband, Mike, and I have two children. Brian is 35, Justin's forever 19. I have a beautiful daughter-in-law who is just amazing, and I'm so blessed with my three granddaughters. Halen and Adeline and Briley. And that's what I live for, right? Those are my hobbies. And I just recently retired from a major financial institution after 27 years and to pursue my passion, which is grief to hope.
Perfect, perfect. So I want to read a quote before I ask you my first question. This is actually on your website, and it says, "Within every individual lies the strength to rise above the pain of loss and create a life filled with purpose, joy, and hope." What does that quote mean to you today, Hope? And what did it mean to you when you first came across it or you wrote it?
For for a very long time, I didn't know what grief was about at all. And I had dealt with the loss of grandparents, the circle of life kind of thing that most children, adults deal with. And then the tragic event of losing my son put me in a tailspin of I didn't know how to react, how to be, how to function. And so over the long period of time, the past 8 years, I've learned that having hope is what really moves us forward in every situation that we come across, whether it's the loss of someone, a loss of relationship, a loss of anything, or as life changes, that hope is what is always needed.
Yes, I know that when you shared your story and when I heard it, it was such an unfortunate situation when you lost your son. And you raise a very good point where many people can grieve in so many different ways. But I think the most common one, at least to those on the outside, is that when someone passes away, you need time for you. And
Mhm.
some people try to support you in the best way that they can. When you first experienced the loss of your son, describe to us the type of emotions that you were feeling during that time.
Yeah, absolutely. So my son was 19 years old. I was the parent that received the knock at the door. And ironically enough, the police that showed up at my door handed me a note instead of telling me what had happened and told me to give that person a call. So I assumed there was no severity in what they needed. Maybe my son, he was 19, got in trouble. I just felt like if it was something horrific, they would have told me in person. And so when I dialed the number, I thanked them and they went on their merry way. And I dialed that number, and the person on the other line answered Greene County Coroner. My world, my emotions at that very moment was complete disbelief, shock, overwhelmed with, all kinds of sadness, of course. And at first, I'll be honest, I really, truly did not believe that they had the right person. Like they didn't have the right mother, the right Justin. Like this was all a big misunderstanding. And most of all, I just tried to talk to the coroner and say, listen, where's my son? I can fix this, right? Like tell me where he is. Where do I need to go to fix this? And so at first it was a lot of denial, a lot of shock, a lot of disbelief. And then ironically enough, you go into an autopilot, or what I think autopilot means. And I knew, because this was newsworthy, this was a murder in a small town, that it was all over the news. But of course, my son's name hadn't been given. And so I immediately, you go into this hurry up, call everybody and try to sort of explain when I didn't know the details myself. And true, like I didn't know the whole story. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know the why behind it, but I wanted to make sure they heard it from me versus the news, of course. And I from there, it was. autopilot for days after that. It wasn't a lot of course, I was, crying and devastated and shock and all of those things, those first few days. But you sort of go through the motions of you've got to take care of it. So you sort of start going point A, point B, point C. And although you're overwhelmed with the tragedy and the emotions of you losing your son, you just aren't really, I say it's like it's just like a candle wax melting. You're sort of just like in the thick of it, right? And it's just all melting together, and you're just trying to survive, right? Then once after the funeral and everything goes on, those next days, weeks, and months, rage began to come in, and anger, and frustration, and I was in a very, very dark place, and I didn't recognize myself and who I was becoming. And all of those emotions in those first weeks and months, you were just barely surviving. And on top of that, because of the tragic events, then there was the anger, which I'm sure many, even in the griefs of others, there's a lot of rage, a lot of anger, a lot of why him, why this person, why that person. And so I think it was also and understanding, like, I didn't know how this grief thing worked, right? Like I didn't know how to grieve. I didn't know if I was doing it right, if I was doing it wrong, if this wasn't what the TV looked like, this wasn't what the movies looked like, right? This was I was in your face, and there was days I could cry, there was days I couldn't cry, there was days that I could get out of bed, there was days I couldn't get out of bed. And it was just a very dark and ugly place for a very long time. And it was very, very hard. And I tell anyone that is going through grief is that it is unique, like you said, very unique to you, and you cannot compare it to any other grief you've had in the past, to any other grief that you'll have in the future, and to anybody else's grief. Don't allow them to compare it to you as well. So, yeah, for the first few weeks, months, it was an ugly, dark place for sure.
There was a woman at work that I used to work with. This must have been, wow, we're aging ourselves a little bit here, Hope. This must have been like 10 years ago. Her daughter passed away,
Uh-huh.
and her life was devastated in a lot of ways that you mentioned. And she took time off of work, and then 1 month became 2 months, 2 months became 6 months, and she had a very difficult time trying to function. And it goes back to that saying where a parent isn't ever supposed to bury their child.
Mm-hmm.
A child is
Mm-hmm.
supposed to bury their parent. And one thing that she mentioned that she struggled with was people were telling her what to feel instead
Mm-hmm.
of allowing her to feel what it is that she feels. And I think maybe part of the problem was on TV, right? Like when someone passes away, the only thing I can compare it to is like they won the lottery. Like there's this, it's like a party in a sense, right? In the movies. And it's kind of odd because when we go through, we're like, okay, where's my party?
Mm-hmm. Right, right.
Right? Where's like my celebration? Yeah, people say don't throw yourself a pity party, but in a lot of ways, you do feel bad because your life before this person passed away is going to be different than when this person passes away. And when I hear your story, and for you, did you have a sense of what life would look like without your son?
So that's part of the grieving process that I went through is when you lose someone, not only do you lose that person, but you also lose the identity of who you were with that person, and you lose the life that you would have had with that person, right? So there's a lot of grieving that has to happen. It's just not the actual loss of the person that you're grieving. I was grieving, it was very close to Christmas time, and I remember signing love mom on my older son's packages. And I was thinking, I only have one son now that will call me mom. And so for many of us that lose children out there, that might be their only child, that identity is lost as well as a parent. Even though you'll always be a parent because you'll always love and nurture and have your children with you in your heart when you lose them, but it changes who you are, it changes your identity. And depending on how you want your life to proceed, everything will start to change within the grief and within your own life compared to what it used to be, right? And everybody says, get back to normal. Let's just get back to normal. Get back to who you were before. And my whole life changed, and it wasn't that I only lost my son. I lost being a mother to that son. I lost the rest of what could have been of his life and ours together. And I lost the person that I was and how I reacted to certain events, things that happened in my life. It's taught me a lot. And I tell everyone, you're not going to ever be that person before that phone call, that event, that death, that anything. You're going to change and you're going to evolve. And for a lot of us, it takes a little bit of time, but we start to move forward into that new identity. And for me, it was, I say this with tongue in cheek kind of thing. It was a gift that my son gave me to teach me I'm more patient, I'm more in the moment, I'm more forgiving, and I'm more, this is today, right? This is tomorrow is not promised. I have today, I have right now, and I need to make the most of what that life means to me and my children and my grandchildren. And sometimes that morphs into a different reality, a different person, a different way of thinking in your everyday life, right? And it can be amazing. Like I am such a better person than I was before. And I thought I was pretty great before, but like literally my son gave me such a gift that most people, until they go into the grief process, will never understand the value of time. And that's really all it's about. I value time now more than I ever have, and every moment counts, every day counts. And saying even within that, putting boundaries around what I do and what I say and the people that I'm with, it's also, providing yourself the capability of saying no, right? A lot of us don't say no. A lot of us just do and do and do and do. And then it's also, saying no, setting boundaries, but it's all comes down to valuing your time and allowing yourself to take full advantage of every opportunity.
When my friend passed away in 2021, you reminded me of a situation when it came to time because he lived in a different part of the country and we always planned to get together to do charity, to do some work. And
Mm,
I think I may have shared this in your group. And we always said that, okay, how about next week? And then next week became next month. Then when he passed away, there wasn't any next month.
mhm,
And you
mm,
begin to realize how important time is, especially when you two are planning to do something that is really good, right? Like if you're planning to do crime, that's a different,
right. Well,
right?
don't do
Yeah,
that.
don't do that, right? But if you're doing something that is happy, then it's a little bit different. And I realized the importance of time. Like I knew that it was valuable before,
Mhm,
but when someone passed away who you were planning to do something, but you always thought that there would be another day. And when
mhm,
that another day doesn't come now, then you're like, wow, it could literally be a snap of the fingers and you're gone. Because the way he passed away, he was at work doing the same thing that he was doing every day. He was helping customers at the bank. He collapsed in front of everyone and he just died in front
mm,
of everyone doing something that he normally does day in, day out. And I tell people it could be that situation where you're running late to work and you don't get to tell your wife or your husband or your kids goodbye. You
mhm,
get into that car, you're in an accident,
Hmm.
that's it.
Yeah.
And I stress the importance to people that when you build these connections, you realize that when you have someone that enters your life that's very important, you're a different person before they enter your life and after you enter your life. And then if they leave, you're a different person before they left and after you left. Why do you think maybe some people forget the impact that this person had on them because maybe they're trying to navigate who they're going to become after this person has left?
So I think a lot of us take advantage of time. They think that we always have time. I look at it in the gym. If you go into the gym, you have two people there. You have older people there and you have younger people there. Usually not in the midst of maybe few and far between, but it's usually younger. They want to improve themselves. They want to get better. They want to, they're young. They've got a lot of energy, whatever that may be. And then the older people are like, shoot, it's getting late. Right? It's getting to be late, right? My cholesterol's up, my heart's not the best. Da, da, da. So we have these people that take advantage of saying, here I'm young, I'm going to keep doing it moving forward. But then we also have the people that say, hey, before it gets too bad, I'll do this. Or most of the time, it's already gotten bad and they're in there trying to save it. It's the mindset that we have all this time in the world until we don't. And so when people in our lives, especially in relationships with toxic people, we allow ourselves to put up with a certain level of toxicity, right? Like we allow ourselves to put up with people because, you think it's not that big of a deal. It's not that hard. It's not that, whatever. Or when we force ourselves to attend a party we really don't want to go to or a work event or whatever, we put ourselves in these situations that normally we wouldn't if we had the chance to say, hey, this is it, Hope. Today is the day. You get no more tomorrows. I guarantee you that I would make different choices of my day if I knew that tomorrow wasn't going to be here. And that's where I was getting at with the gym. It's like we always think we have all this time till we don't have all this time, right? And it's the same thing with life as we start to accept and allow things to happen in our lives because we are always like, we have time, it'll be better. Tomorrow I'll get another job and then we realize 5, 10 years down the road that we're still stuck in this horrible job that we hate, but we're putting up with it thinking one day I'll do this, right? And that's why I always say to people, you have to look at it as day one versus one day because the one days normally never show, right? The one days of starting your diet usually don't ever come around. Like one day is not a specific day. Like that's why I tell people, like, like one day I'll do this, one day I'll do that. I'm like, that's not like December 13th or a Wednesday. That's one day, right? So if we put on a deadline, like Parkinson's law states that if you put a deadline on something, it happens. If you don't put a deadline on it, half the time doesn't happen. And that's because our mind says by this date, I want to make a change, right? Or I have something at work that needs to be done by 5 o'clock. And ironically enough, if I say that exact project has to be ready by 2 o'clock, I'll get it done at 2 o'clock. But that's the way that our mind thinks. But as long as there's a deadline, right? Then that tells us we got to get it done. So we live our lives without deadlines, right? And ironically enough, that's when we run out of time. If you know what I mean. So it's like we have to put deadlines on things before our deadlines happen, right? And I'm making light of it, but it's an absolute truth that I think we don't put significant amount of effort, accountability on ourselves to make any changes. We're in the midst of sorrow, despair, sadness, we just feel like this is what it is. This is how it's going to be, and it doesn't have to be that way, right? It doesn't have to be sadness and sorrow. And there's going to be days of sadness and sorrow. Absolutely. That's life. That's how we live, right? But that's also gives us the days of sunshine and happiness. It's the difference, right? So we know the difference. And so I think that one of the things that I put in people's minds is just value your time and don't think that you're ever going to get to something if you keep saying one day, one day, one day.
Yeah, you gave the workplace analogy, and I will always tell people that one of the most toxic, if not the most toxic relationship you'll ever have is with your job,
Mm,
right? Like,
bad.
right, very bad. Like, how many people miss birthdays, anniversaries, their children growing up? You know, there's an acquaintance of mine. He missed the birth of his child while he was
Mm,
working away, and it's one. You only get the one. Like, you can't
right.
rebirth the same child, right?
Right. It doesn't happen twice. It does
It
not.
doesn't happen twice. So now he has to, wait until he makes another one and says, okay,
Right. And
I
hope
got it.
that he's not working on that day,
I'd
right?
hope that he's not working that day. It's just like if someone were to pass away in your family, you can't, bring them back to life and then
Right.
unalive them again, right? But
Right.
it's scary to see how much we sacrifice because to your point, a deadline next Tuesday, we can see it,
Mm-hmm.
feel it.
Mm-hmm.
A deadline at the age of 90 or 85 for men, the average there, we don't, a lot of people don't see it because they're thinking it's so far ahead. There's a quote that I listened to when I was watching an interview. The man said, "The days are long, but the years are short."
Mm.
Meaning that you could be working, right? And you're like, oh my God, I still have 8 more hours in the day. But then you wake up one day and you're like, I'm 45,
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
50,
Right. Or higher. For me, but
65.
yeah. No, not yet. But you're absolutely right. Like I think we put too much emphasis on our work relationships. And I love it, we've all seen the quote that you are gone from your work and they're going to replace you within days. It's not going to be like you're irreplaceable. But it's unfortunate that we feel like we have to be at work. And I get it. We have to make money. We have to live. That's the way of life, but too often do we put ourselves last and our work first and allow ourselves to be almost punished to the fact that we're okay with missing events in lives and it's not okay, and it's not fair and it's one of the things that I think a lot of people struggle with. I have to be at work. I have to have a job. I have to take care of my family. So I'm going to miss these times. I'm going to miss these experiences. And they're few and far between. For a lot of people, they miss a lot. A lot of people have, being in different job roles, police officers, nurses, doctors, that sort of, the given, the holidays and those kind of things. But and bless their heart that they're able to be there for those of us who may need them on a holiday. Um, but you got to start wondering what's important, what's the main goal, and know that that job is not your identity, right? It's not who you are as a person. It's who your career, your livelihood, but it's not who you are as an identity. And I think a lot of times we think, hey, I'm an accountant or I'm a financial advisor and this is who I am. That's not who you are, right? That's your job. That's your career. That could be, your moneymaker. But I want to know, or people want to know, and your family wants the you that's in there, the parent, the mom, the dad. Those are the most important for me.
I wonder how many people would grieve for themselves if they were to step away from their job and try to do something else.
It's huge, right? Sometimes you get forced into it if there's, the layoffs or, job eliminations or shutdowns, which we're going through a lot right now. But I think a lot of it has to do with whenever you have a life-changing moment, whether it's a job loss, a job change, a career change, a divorce, a family, a grief, a death, those change your day-to-day lives, right? Your life's day-to-day will change. And so in a career focus, one of the things that I stress is that if you're not happy in your career and you're just punching a clock, don't say the words, in 5 years, I want to be here, right? You can say that, but if you're not doing anything in the 5 years to change it, then that's not going to go away. That's not going to change. It's just not going to be magic, right? So if you want to be certain place in a year, 3 years, 5 years, you have to make certain changes every single day to get yourself to that point. And that builds the momentum and the strength to say, I can make this change. I want to go for this. And a lot of times people don't dream, they don't pursue their passions or purpose because they feel like one, they're not worthy of it. Two, they're not educated enough for it. And three, they don't have enough knowledge or skill, right? So if I say I want to be a motivational speaker, which I do, but if I said that and I was working at a major financial institution, right, I would do steps to get myself to where I would want to be that dream job. I couldn't say, hey, I want to be in 5 years, I'm going to be a motivational speaker and not do anything, right, to get me there. But hope and dream, right? I hope it happens. That's not how it works. You have to work at it. You have to put yourself out there. You have to be uncomfortable to make those changes. And that's the bottom line. But you do grieve any life event, any life event.
Do you think the one day syndrome, and that's what I'm going to start calling it from now, Hope.
I love it.
I love it, right? Do you think the one day syndrome is, in a way, a safety net for those who know maybe deep down that they won't be able to make the change or at least hold themselves accountable?
Well, it's the hopes and dreams and wishes, right? Like when we're young, we say, oh, when I grow older, when I grow up, I want to be a doctor, right? But if I don't make any educational choices to do that, right? It's a hope, it's a dream, it's a want, right? But if I put action behind it, if I put action behind that one day, and say, I'm going to take this course, I'm going to mentor with this person, I'm going to research this, I'm going to, and put it on a plan, right? And write it down, put it on a chalkboard, put it on a white erase board, put it wherever you see it and say, this is my plan to get to where I want to be. Because again, if you hope and dream, and I think those are fabulous things, right? When you're young and even when you're older, if you have a hope and a dream, but unless you want to put forth the work and the effort to get there, it's going to stay as that hope and that dream. And it's so easy, like you said, to stay in that comfort zone, right? Because when you get out of that comfort zone, it's icky. It's not comfortable, right? It's not. And so when you put yourself out there and you're uncomfortable, that's most of the time when growth happens. And when growth happens, your mind, your body, everything starts to change and build the strength. So when you're uncomfortable in a situation and it's icky and it's like, I don't want to be here, but I know it's good for where I need to be. That's an amazing thing in it. And once you accomplish it, it's like this. When you go into the gym, I don't know why I'm referencing the gym so much tonight. I'm thinking I gotta get up and work out tomorrow. But when you go into the gym, right, it's uncomfortable, it's icky, it's early in the morning, you don't want to be there, it's dark, it's cold, and you get in there and you get on that machine or you run or you do whatever, you lift those weights. When you come out, you feel accomplished and you're smiling. So it's just getting yourself through that uncomfortable feeling to say, this is what I need to start moving forward. And then when you reach that mission, that goal, it's amazing. Like I tell everybody, I said, I am not smiling going in, but I'm smiling going out. And that's the way I feel when it comes to the gym, right? Nobody wants to go work out. I mean, some people might, but on the way out, you're like, I got this. So it's good to be uncomfortable.
I think some people undervalue the importance of overcoming an obstacle,
Mm.
right? Like you mentioned at the gym, right? Like you go in there and you're in the parking lot, and how many times do you catch yourself doing like that pre-gym prayer? Like, oh God, please, I don't really want to be here, but I'm here. So, then you get into it, you kind of do like your half reps, and they're like, okay, this feels kind of good. You do full reps, and they're like, okay, I had a personal best. And then by the time you're done and you're smiling, an hour and a half has gone by. You're like, wow, I
Yes.
just did that. And I think that's how people have to look at a caution is saying that the first couple of minutes, the first couple of days, the first couple of weeks is going to be tough. You're going to get
Mm-hmm.
your butt handed to you. You're going to get your butt kicked.
Mm-hmm.
But once you overcome it, you're like, wow, I couldn't believe I did this. And then the next challenge, you have this renewed confidence. You can take
Mm-hmm.
on the world. How do we get people to that point, Hope, where they're like, I know I can do this, even though the first early stages of it is tougher starting than it is finishing.
It all comes down believing in you. I can't do that for you. You can't do that for me. Is you have to believe in yourself and you have to have the mindset that you can absolutely put anything to your mind and do it. And it's so true and so real. And it's put in us, like I believe that we have a purpose put in with us and it's within us to find it, right? I don't know what yours is, you don't know what mine is, but we have it. And so when we decide that we want to do something, like if it's run a marathon or become a doctor or motivational speaker, if we don't provide our own selves the belief, no one else is going to believe in it. And so until you actually understand and feel the strength that you are enough to accomplish this, right? However much work it's going to take, however much determination, desire, things that you have to do to get to the point where you have to, you know, reach that success or what you say is success is believing in yourself. Because if you don't believe you're going to do it, I'm guaranteeing you, you're not going to do it. Like if I said to myself every day, grief to hope's a flop and you're never going to do anything with it, then there's no point of even trying, right? But same thing with running a marathon. If you're on the couch 24/7 and you want to run a marathon in 6 months, well, you got to get up and do something, right? But you also got to believe that at the end that you're capable of doing that. If you say from the get-go, I don't believe in myself, I don't think I can do it, it's not going to happen. And so I think believing in ourselves, I can't force that on anybody, but man, this world would be so much better if we all believed in our hopes and dreams and what we really want to accomplish, because we all have it within us. We really do. And some days I forget that, right? I'm a human being, and some days when I fail or something doesn't go right, or I think I've got this in the bag, or I thought this was going to happen and it doesn't. I gotta learn and I gotta understand that you gotta believe that this is going to come and be successful within your heart and soul.
I look at your group, your support group, as one of the ways that people can do that,
Mm.
right? Like when you think about what you went through and some of the stories that you've heard and some of the experiences that you have shared back and forth with others who've shared with you and you shared with yourselves, there's going to be times where some people are like, Hope, I just don't have the confidence to be that way, right? As you described it. And then you find this group, and then other people are lifting you up. You're like, okay, I think I can do this because everyone around me is telling me I can do this. Like, imagine someone is going through something and they feel so alone because grief can be very isolating,
Oh yeah.
right? In all its
Yeah.
forms. And then you have someone there saying, Terrain, you got this. I know you can do it. Come, let's do this together. Someone says the same thing to you. But then you and I, we pick someone else up. Three other people join us. Now we have six. All these
Mm-hmm.
people, right? It's very hard, at least to me, to say, you know what? I still don't believe in myself, even though all these people believe in me. Like a lot of times you have no hope. You're like, okay, they think I could do it. Let me at least try, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're at the finish line waiting for me to cross the finish line to jump for joy. Do you
Mm-hmm.
see what you're doing as that kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Source of support for people?
So grief to hope, yeah, absolutely. We're more powerful in numbers, right? We're more powerful in numbers, and that's the thing with grief and support is with our grief support. We share our experiences so others can understand that they're not alone. They're not isolated on this island with grief. And so I talk about this a lot, Trina, as you know, and being on my groups, is that people watch you grieve. People will watch and observe you grieve. They will watch and observe you accomplish, and they will watch and observe you with adversity. People will watch and observe. And so, one of the greatest gifts that I can give anybody is one, a safe space to come and be themselves, right? You don't have to pretend you're okay. You don't have to act like you're okay. You can come, you can cry, you can laugh. We all, it's non-judged, right? So that's the freedom in the group itself. But then also to take apart and say, this is what I've done, and this is how I've gotten to this point. And that provides the opportunity to believe in yourself to say, if she can go through this, right? If she can go through the loss of her son and her son was murdered and still experience joy, still provide service to others, because that's the whole point of grief to hope, and still provide hope, positivity, compassion. I can still be empathetic. I can still provide people with, you know, compassion, love, support after the death, after the most horrible experience a parent can go through. Then if that's providing hope for those that are joining my group, then that's everything, right? Because they're watching me, they're observing me, and they're observing everyone in that group. And not one person in my group shows defeat, right? They are all there saying, I value myself, I value my loved one, but I'm not going to quit, right? And that's why grief to hope is so important, is that it provides that support that says, we're all in this together. We're all going through this journey together. This helped me, that helped me. Here, let me give you some advice on what helped me, how I did this, how I handled that. It all provides that concrete kind of, what's the word, like foundation to say, you've got this, right? You've got it. And if you're having a raw day, that's okay. We still got you, right? We still have you, and we're going to provide you that support. And that's one of the things I love about Grief to Hope. And I tell everybody, for a lot of us, it's the first time we've ever put ourselves first in coming to these support groups, because you always put everybody else ahead of you, and it's a place where you can come and put yourself first and not be judged for it, right? So it's amazing. I love it.
I shared with someone a couple of days ago that there's, especially it seems lately, there's two ways to unite people, either through hatred of something, like discrimination and things of that nature, or through love. But with love, it lasts so much longer
Mm,
because it's a character thing versus when it's hate, you can say that, okay, I hate people that have blonde hair.
mm-hmm,
Eventually, if there's no one with blonde hair, you have nothing to hate. So you got to find something else to dislike. Where when it's love, I can say, I love that we're united. And that's a character trait because there's something about that person that is exuding that. So when you created this and you spoke so eloquently about it, that's the love. And that's why the people find the strength in the numbers, and they find strength in being united because they know when they need that shoulder to support them, because the world can be difficult.
Mm.
There's a group out there, there's a source of other people that is definitely out there. And my question to you is, as I'm hearing you say that, is you mentioned that there was some change that you went through when your son passed. Do you think that he's like the battery that's powering you to deliver everything that you do within the group and within the world today?
Absolutely, 100 million%. So one of the things that I share it with Grief to Hope is that this is all in honor of my son, right? And so what he left me with, that gift that he left me with, is the power of service, gratitude, patience, and to share what I went through and provide my thoughts, experiences with the world. But there's no better cheerleader than someone that you can't see. And what I mean by that is, and I tell this, in a weird kind of sense of way, but he can't talk back to me. He can't tell me no. He can't say, Mom, that's silly. Don't do that. He can't say, Mom, don't do that. He has to provide the cheer without saying a word, right? And so that, what better cheerleader? Like if all supporters could just be there and support you, and they agree with every single thing you do, right? They're the best cheerleaders, right? Like he can't tell me, Mom, that's silly, Mom, that's no, that doesn't make sense, or quit embarrassing me, or whatever kids do, right? Until I meet him again. But I think that's the power behind it. And it also it fuels me. It fuels my fire to know that I live for the both of us. I live for him and until I pass, this is him and I, right? Against the world. And so I need to protect my honor like nothing else. And so when I get to the point where I want to quit, or I want to stop, or something fails, I have the most powerful thing backing me up, and that is my son's honor. And so I'm like, nope, not going to quit, not going to let up. This is all because of him. And it's the most amazing support you can ever ask for. And it doesn't speak back. So it's a win-win kind of thing.
It's like an endless support, or center, an endless source of inspiration,
Yes, I love that. Yes,
right?
it was
It doesn't ever
exactly that.
die. It always burns, right?
Yeah.
It's just endless. It's forever. It can light up the sky 1,000 times
Mm,
endlessly.
I love those words. Yes. Perfect.
I seen that you did a couple of talks in
Uh-huh.
person. I've seen a couple of sessions, and I wish I lived closer because I would love to see it in person. But I promise I will be there, just because I spend so much time in the States, anyways, living in Canada. So one day I will definitely catch you in person. But how does that feel to take it from, let's say, the online world to in person, and you get to see these different people, city to city, state to state, place to place?
It's amazing. I am so blessed to be able to spend time with people that are in the grief world. And these people are warriors. They are the most strongest, amazing people, just like yourself, just making differences, and how they're surviving, and making a difference. And everyone that I ever come in contact with has always put a smile on my face. And even though we may be in the um, same environment with the grief, it's it's not a depressing kind of ugly place. It's a very beautiful kind of thing. And we always talk about our loved ones, and they always come up and they share very similar situations. One of the greatest things that I'm heavily involved in is men and women in recovery right now. And so I'm going to, several institutions where there's men and women, and they're handling their recovery. And I go in, I talk to grief. And a lot of times they're like, this is the first time I've ever even talk to you about my grief, right? And these men and women, what they have gone through and what they've seen in their lifetime, most people could never imagine. And it's hard because they are battling two or three struggles, the addiction, the grief, maybe a childhood trauma. It could be anything, but they're battling at least the grief and the recovery. And these people are incredible. I cannot stress enough that meeting people where they're at in an open forum, allowing people to be their natural, authentic self is just incredible. It's like no one puts on a mask, a fake kind of persona. They're just raw in them. And it's amazing. It's amazing. And so speaking to all of these groups, whether it's, a national group of bereaved parents or men and women in recovery, it's just being around these people builds me just the strength of 1,000 men to keep pushing what I'm doing because it means something, right? What they're doing means something. And I tell them all, I said, write your story, write your books, write whatever, because your story matters to somebody either in your family or somebody out here that needs to hear your story of what you've accomplished. And that's just like what I say with grief. People watch you, right? People watch you, and some people want to see you fail. They want to see you fail. Let's just be honest with you. And so one of the things that I try to tell people is people want to see you fail because they don't want to lack in their accomplishments, right? So if you're in recovery and your best friend who's not in recovery, they want you to fail because then they don't want to look upon you as being successful. You're going to be one of them, right? You're not looking at it's not pushing me to be in recovery if you fail. So that's why a lot of times in all aspects, if you put yourself with people that don't want you to succeed, then that's what eventually will drag you down and that toxicity to say, you know, I need to be around people that want the best of me, including myself. And that's where you have to set those boundaries and start to believe in what you have. But it's been amazing. I love it.
What do you think are some of the misconceptions, since you have pointed to one, about those in recovery from grief or something else that maybe we need to debunk so we can further better help those who are going through it?
I love this question and I talk about it often. There's so much stigma and biases when it comes to overdose, suicide, and murders when it comes to the grief process. We are more empathetic, more sympathetic when those that are lost of an illness, a death, of disease, cancer, whatever, than the mother that loses someone to fentanyl overdose or a suicide. And that has got to stop because those are decisions that were made by the person lost, right? That doesn't determine the empathy that you should provide somebody that's grieving because a loss is a loss, right? And so we've got to stop putting so much emphasis on how a person passes versus what we can do to help that person deal with that loss. And it could be stillborns has a stigma, miscarriage have a stigma, all of those things that we don't, or we sort of put into a jar, if you will, of saying it's not as severe as, someone dying of cancer or someone dying, you know, those are events that's happened to us. And it could be just as like if you were in an accident, an automobile accident. These are things and events that happen. And if you look at the person that's grieving and say, you know, awkward, awful, suggestive things, right? Or treat them separately or differently than someone you wouldn't normally be sympathetic for, you would be normally sympathetic for. It's only hurting us as a society to put us in a bias, stigma kind of relationship with that person because they're hurting. That's it. They're hurting, they're grieving, and we all have to come together and provide that support, that compassion, no matter how that person lost their loved one, and get rid of these stigmas. They're horrible.
I always found it very interesting that people will put different values on people
Mm,
when they pass away, right? It's like there's this unwritten criteria. If they're a celebrity, they get X amount of value. If they're someone that works at a certain job, they get this amount of value. If they've died this way, they get this amount of value, right? Like it seems in general, everyone, that no one's going to care about the barista who overdosed,
right. Right. I
right?
totally get it. Right.
Right.
And it's sad because I can't remember, I think it was Maine had that really mass shooting. It was a terrible shooting. I think it was Maine. And then right after that, the Friend star died. And it was like nothing ever was said about the mass shooting after that Friend star died, right? It was all about that Friend star, and I can't think of his name. This Matthew Perry, maybe.
Matthew Perry, yeah, Canadian
Yeah,
guy too. Yeah.
yeah. And so it was literally like, I don't know, days or a week after. And then my heart broke for those people. It was almost like, okay, nothing's now being said because this famous person passed away. And unfortunately, that's the way that society is that we sort of glamorize celebrities and those kind of people before our own, right? But one of the things that we have to understand is that, you know, those people had families, those people had parents, those people had siblings. And Matthew Perry did too, right? He had parents and he had siblings, and we get so focused on the criteria of who passes. And let's be honest, we are nosy people. We are no, we want to know the gist of it. We want to know how they died. We want to know. And Matthew Perry, like they just told, like, I don't even know how, just I try to avoid the news as much as possible, but like once that comes in, then it's like, oh, well, how did he die? And then, or we'll do this when someone our age passes away. How did you die? Right. And, then you start figuring out, like, okay, yeah, and then what symptoms did you have? And then I start WebMDing. And I just told somebody today, by the time I get done WebMDing, I've got tuberculosis or, liver cancer or something because my mind starts going, right? So I think in a way we're very, very nosy people and we need to stop and think of the families that are left behind. And I am all about when someone passes on a news. We had a child here that was struck and killed on a school bus, first day of school. And it was very, you know, all over the news, but countless times and still to this day it's on the news, right? So imagine as a mother, you're watching TV, it's been a year or 2 years, and that comes on the news, right? We just don't have any etiquette when it comes to, okay, I get the news is newsworthy and we want to make sure, but then first days of school, right? They're going to flash back to that. Guess what happened last year at this time? And so this mother has to be re-traumatized by the news breaking. So we've just got to really start to take a step back and understand that we're all people, we're all human, and that newsworthy events have families and emotions behind it.
I agree. I think it's one thing to announce it, like the mass shooting you mentioned, or the friend star Matthew Perry that passed away, or the young child that was struck. It's one thing to mention it, but then to replay, because I couldn't imagine seeing that replay of a child being struck on the first day of school. And let's say that I had a near accident experience where I was almost struck.
Yeah,
Now you're conditioning me to be even more paranoid because you're going to be paranoid if you're almost hit by a car. I remember years ago an R&B singer by the name of Leah when she passed away,
right.
airplane crash, right?
Yeah,
There was someone, I forget where I was working at the time, but there's someone who was very devastated. She only knew Aaliyah through her music.
right.
And I remember some people asking her the question. They're like, you seem to be more emotionally distraught over her passing than your own family member who passed away,
Right.
right?
Right.
And then there's a little bit of confusion on her face. And then it made me, when you mentioned it, made me think that we're conditioned to care more about the celebrity who we don't know, who we don't love, because how can you love someone you don't know, versus the family member who we love, who we spent
Mhm.
time with, has been there for that. And it made me remember that person who expressed all these emotions for someone they didn't know and very little emotions for someone that they did know. Why do you think we put so much more value on people that we're told to put value on versus those who are more value, who should be more valuable to us, like a close friend, like a close family member, or even a loved one?
Mhm. I think one of the biggest things is that when an event takes place, like a sudden tragic event, it takes everybody by surprise, whether it's celebrity, family member. So depending on the circumstances of how they passed, right? When a celebrity dies young, it's very impactful, right? Especially if we've got relationships like they're our same age, or we knew them. I'm not saying a celebrity, but if we grew up listening to them, or if it's something where it's a family member that was ill, has lived their life, it's sort of like the circle of life that it may not impact us just as much, right? And so I think one, tragedies cause more of an impact with us with our emotional aspect of it. And what I mean by that is it's a shock to the system first, right? And no matter who it is, right? It's just an unexplained death. And so for many of us, we ask the question of why. Why did that happen? Why did it's just not the progression of life. So I think it all depends on who it is, what it is, and it may have a significance to that person. She may have grew up with that person, listening to that person. She may be of close to her own age, and or she may have been into a situation where, she uh, was scared on an airplane. I don't know, but I think all of it compares to expecting the unexpected will put you in more of a frame of mind of just overwhelming why, right? And it scares you to a point where that could happen to me. So sometimes we get emotionally connected to things like that, where somebody dies getting plastic surgery, right? They're going in for plastic surgery, and you're thinking about doing plastic surgery. They're your age, they go in and it's an unforeseen, they are allergic to anesthesia, something happens, right? So that's an emotional connection that I have, even though I may not know that person, but it's an unexpected event. And so whenever that happens, it throws us into a nervous kind of, wow, that could happen to me, right? And I could have been on an airplane, or she's my age, or, especially I've heard tragic events of children going in and having a tooth pulled and passing away. You just go in and, you don't have that, you don't expect it. You expect to go in, you get your tooth out, and you come out, right? And when events like that happen, it scares the hell out of us.
I wonder as well, to your point, I wonder how much it is, how much you can relate to what has happened. Like, so let's say, for example, when young children pass away, or if there's like a, let's say, a mass shooting, let's say Sandy Hook in the States, for example,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of outrage and of outpour because everyone can relate to that because everyone was a child at some point.
Hmm.
So maybe many of us are thinking like, wow, I couldn't imagine being 11 years old and being in that situation and not
Hmm.
having grown up to be 30 years old. Or you look back on all that you accomplished. For example, you're married and you're like, I could imagine being 8 years old and not meeting my husband, not having my children. So we can relate to it. And I wonder if that's maybe so why sometimes when you see when you hear people who pass away from things that you can't relate to, such as let's say an overdose, which gets very
Hmm.
little attention. You have a lot of people saying that, well, I wouldn't ever do drugs, so they kind of
Right.
put it to the side, right? I wonder how much that plays into it as well. What are your thoughts, Hope?
No, I think that's great. I think that's a great ad. I mean, and that's the thing that we look at. Like, I don't go, if I don't ride an airplane, I'm never going to die in an airplane, right? If I don't do drugs, I'm never going to have an overdose unless something weird happens with medical, whatever. There's always those what ifs. If I don't drink alcohol, I won't die of alcohol poisoning, those kind of things. Um, and then there's tragic events that happen, hit by a bus or, shootings and those kind of things that put you in that place where you can feel, right? You can put yourself in those people's shoes and say, I couldn't imagine going to school in this time of age. And, that absolutely makes sense. Like, if we can't put ourselves in that situation, it's hard for us to say how you would feel, how you would react. And that goes along with grief too, right? If you've never felt grief, and I tell people this all the time, like if you've never been through grief, you won't really get what I'm saying in a way. You understand sadness, we understand loss, we understand, those kind of things. But if you've never dealt with grief in your own personal life, you can look at my group and say, why do we need that? Why do you need support for that? Like, until you're in it. And and sadly, that's what's happening. And why we don't talk about death because we've never been through it, right? And that's what I tell people all the time. I said, we don't talk about death because none of us have ever done it, right? That are here. So we don't want to talk about it. And so I think in a light is if what we don't know, we don't know, and it scares the heck out of us, and death's one of them. And whenever an overdose happens, if you've never seen or ever had drugs, substance abuse, any kind of thing in your life, it's hard for you to get it, right? But that's where we need to open up the eyes. And let me tell you, the opioid epidemic right now is horrible. But if you're in your little bubble and you don't see any of it, you don't get it. You won't support it, right? And so that's where we just really have to be aware of our people and our family. And let's be honest with us, a lot of people don't even know that people are doing it in their family. It's just they're oblivious to it.
And it goes back to your earlier point where, or our earlier point where it can be so isolating
Mm.
when you're going through this. And speaking of helping people not feel isolated, what is next for Grief to Hope?
So I love that. We are doing some speaking engagements. We are going to keep doing our recovery. We're doing our virtual right now. We're in the midst. Grief to Hope is a 7-week program that I do virtual, as well as some in-person events. Um, our next goals are to bring grief in the workplace. I need to get out there and talk about how to help those people that are coming back to work. I need to get out there and help people to support those people that are coming back to work because they have to earn that money, but they're not ready to be in that production environment yet, but they're expected to be there. That poof, we come back from grief after our 3 or 5 day bereavement, and we're perfectly fine, and we're gonna just produce, and we're gonna be those amazing employees again. And it doesn't happen that way, and unfortunately, we just don't have a lot of knowledge when it comes to that. So Grief to Hope is working on grief in the workplace, getting the information out, as well as how to help people that are grieving. That's one of our main things. And of course, our virtual groups are always 4 times a year and open to all.
And as we close, Hope, what last words of advice do you want to give to those who are grieving and are you want to make sure that they understand that they're not alone and there's help out there?
Absolutely. First, thank you for this opportunity of being here. You're an amazing guy, and I love you so. Um, First off, when you're grieving, is one, you're unique in your grief. Do not compare your grief to any other griefs you've had in the past or to anyone else or to TV, movies. Your grief is going to be different for every single person that you grieve. Allow yourself patience for the new changes that will happen and allow yourself to feel those changes. Empower yourself to feel those changes. Believe that you are everything you need to be at that moment and not to feel guilty or failing or you're not doing it right because it's not the way society looks at it or friends or family look at it. You're exactly where you need to be at that moment. And if you need extra support, the resources out here are incredible. So reach out. You can go to my website, grief, the number two, hopesupport.com, or grief in general. You can Google it. There is so things out here online, virtual, in-person groups that we're here to help, and that's what we're all about. So have grief. I call it grief patience.